Hi, my name is Colson Youngblood, and I'm a current student at Texas A&M University. I had the pleasure of getting to hear Dr. Shannan Crawford at the Leader Exchange Luncheon in Fort Worth, and her story caught my attention and really intrigued me. And so I wanted to use today as an opportunity to get to know Dr. Shannan Crawford, where she came from, how she grew up, and how that has really played into how she pursues her, business today, and how or where she grew up and who she grew up around and what mattered to her as she grew up, just played into her story today and how that got her to where she is today. So we welcome Dr. Shannan Crawford onto her own podcast, and we look forward to getting to know more about her today.
This is so fun. I'm always interviewing others. So thank you for this creative idea. I love it.
Yes, ma'am. Well, let's just go ahead and start with, where did you grow up? What was your family like? And just kind of give us a little bit of background about who you are and where you came from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Monterey Bay, which is the central coast of California, which is not Northern California. Everyone from LA thinks everything north of Orange County is Northern California. There's a long state, people. I am from Monterey County, central of the state. And I grew up wanting to be, at first I knew I was called to be a missionary. Didn't know what that meant. Thought that it was long brown skirts living in a tiki hut somewhere. And then I went to LA to be an actress and tried to get as far away as possible from business. My parents are business owners, and we were poor, like poorer than Job's turkey, as my mom would say. I don't actually know what that expression means, but that was something she would say. We were like real poor. And so I watched them scale and grow their business and became very successful. And my mom tried to teach me business, and I was like, no, I'm going to be an actress. I don't have to learn these things. And I'm actually third generation entrepreneur now, which is the irony of whatever you vow you're never going to do usually ends up being a path, right? So I went to LA to be an actress. I got jobs. It was fun. I actually had a really positive experience. But my family was praying that God would dry up the desire and they didn't have to be the bad guy. So unbeknownst to me that these things were being prayed behind my back, I got to go have fun, had a great experience. And I was auditioning on stage one day, and all of a sudden I was like, I don't want to act anymore. I don't know what happened. This has consumed my life. I was in traveling acting companies. I've been acting since a child. And all of a sudden it just dried up. And so I went to my college counseling center and told her about, my little quandary. What am I going to do with my life? And she said, well, let's start with your childhood. Tell me about, what you remember of your childhood. And I said, I don't remember anything. And she's like, rolled her eyes, like, why don't you come back when you're not being resistant? And so in that moment, I then judged psychology. I'm a communication major at that time with platinum blonde hair, gold eyelashes. I mean, I was like LA. I was like, psychology is the stupidest profession. I would literally never do that. So I judged business, and then I judged psychology, and as the world would work, right? Then I went to someone else, and she said, well, let's ask the Holy Spirit if there's a reason you don't remember. And then childhood memories of trauma started to surface. And it was like a treasure hunt where I could feel something come alive inside of me that like my heart was awakening to something I didn't have language for. And I knew I am a good person. I come from a good family. I shouldn't have as many issues as I have. I just had all kinds of mental health issues, eating disorders, all kinds of issues, right? And so to now have that key, I was like, oh my gosh, I want other people to know this, because all these high achievers out there, we're working our tail off. And yet without knowing what the unconscious mind is doing, then it's like going up a mountain with your legs tied together. And so we can do it, but you're frustrated, you're doubling over yourself. It's not as productive and meaningful. And so then that created a large pivot, and I went toward clinical psychology. I had good mentors. I believe in mentorship. And a good mentor was like, you can't do anything with a bachelor's in psychology. You should get your doctorate. And I'm like, okay. I don't know that that's going to take the next 10 years of my life. Sure. Goodbye 20s. And so moved to Virginia, moved to Hawaii, and moved to Dallas for residency. So just I did the things, and then started my business in 2012. Ironically, side story, I don't follow celebrities. I'm actually pretty unimpressed, but this came in my mind. So I knew it didn't come from me, that Paris Hilton is famous for sex tapes. Okay,
Sure.
weird. But I felt like the Lord paralleled. He said she's famous for sex tapes because she's not stewarding the wisdom and business that her family has accrued generationally. While at that time, this is like, 12 years ago, 20 years ago, Ivanka Trump was famous, and I might be slaughtering her name because, again, I don't follow celebrities. She was famous at that time for growing in business and utilizing what her father had taught her in business. And so I felt like the Lord almost like cautioned me, like, hey, be careful. You're not willing to grow in the area that your family has accrued. And so being now third generation of entrepreneurialism, I wrote that down in my dream binder, which I have a huge dream binder. Each section has their own little labels and tabs for all of my millions of dreams. And so I wrote all of those out. And then within 9 months, an opportunity came to me, and I'll pause there so you can ask more questions.
Yes, for sure. Man, that's an awesome story and love getting to hear that. I want to dive into, what do you think made you look at your life as an opportunity to steward the gifts that you receive and also the values you inherited from your family? When was that most apparent to you?
It's such a good question. I think up to that point, I just thought I'm going to be a famous actress. And my motivation at that time was actually not that this is all people in acting. For me personally, it was because I had a lot of self-rejection from childhood trauma, unprocessed. And so I think a lot of my life, I was actually pretty self-absorbed. And then now when my own trauma started to come conscious, I started working on that. I felt like that was that sweet space where I could now start kind of bringing my head above just survival mode and looking around and being like, oh my gosh, actually, where I've seen myself as a victim so much of my life and just trying to get my own emotional needs met in life, man, what an opportunity I have, and what a great life I actually do have that I couldn't see before. And so I probably was in my mid to late 20s. And it was like a real profound weightiness that all of us are more blessed than we realize. And we can get so stuck in analysis paralysis and overthink and overanalyze and compare, instead of going, what I do have, I could actually enrich the world. So when the Lord contrasted in my heart, I didn't have audible. It was just the thought came in my mind of comparing Paris Hilton to Ivanka Trump, and just seeing that contrast. I was like, wow, I can build my kingdom for myself, or I can start living for something that's legacy and building to enrich the lives of others. And that's that pivot point for me.
That is so awesome. I love the word legacy. And I've heard it said that you never regret knowing God, yourself, and others more. And I love how, as you got to know yourself more, you had a desire to get to know others more, which is so cool. Tell me more about this dream binder. That sounds crazy and fun. Do you write every single dream truly, or do you have categories? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. It is actually downstairs right now. So it's very large. I don't know how. I think it's part of being an entrepreneur. It's truly in my DNA. All of my childhood memories, when I look back, when other little girls were playing with Barbie dolls and baby dolls and nursing them or teaching them dolls, I was always running a little mini business in my imagination, right? So I had little chandelier pieces that my dad, he was broke. So he would try to come home and bring toys back, which would be in construction. You have the little broken chandelier pieces. So those were my wares to sell. And so I would sell that to my imaginary customers, or I would walk around our little tiny house and be like, this is the resort. And I would show the imaginary audience, whoever's coming to my pretend resort, and weeds coming through the trampoline. I'm like, this is the gymnasium for your leisure time. I didn't go to resorts. I have no idea where this came from, but it's in you, right? And so I think part of being an entrepreneur is being a visionary. And so there's a principle of write the vision, make it plain so the messenger can run with it. So now I have the vision written, and now I can start making life steps toward that. So even now I have a team as a CEO of Crawford Clinics that they've had to learn and educate me of, when I tell people my dreams, they think I'm talking about right now. And they're like, how do you do all of that in a day? And I'm like, oh no, I'm totally comfortable having a million different dreams. Some of them happen, some of them don't. That's okay. But I'm always moving toward that trajectory by writing it down. So then I feel like the Lord just gave me the idea. Nobody taught me to just create sections and tabs for each of my dreams. So it's personal life, marriage, family, business, being a professor. I had no experience of being a professor or a TA, teacher's assistant, anything at all. And one day somebody reached out and was like, hey, would you like to be an adjunct professor at our university? And I actually thought it was a scam. because being a professor is actually really challenging and you have to know people. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't apply and I'm not famous. So that's weird. So then later I was like, I should probably at least follow up and check. And it was real. I wanted to have a podcast, wrote that vision down. Somebody reached out to me on Facebook Messenger and I thought, this is a scam. This is somebody in the Philippines who wants my social security number. And so I ignored it. And then come to find out, I did my little due diligence, checked the person, and it was real. And so that's how I started the podcast. I wanted to have a business. So I wrote down my business plan. And then, within 9 months, that's where I left off my story before. And I was presenting at a conference for psychology, and a psychologist came up after and he was like, hey, would you like to join our co-op? You would have your own business, but we would share the overhead so it's less risk. So at 29, I started my own business. I left the security of, benefits and salary and all of those things to go be a poor entrepreneur and give it a shot. So a lot of my dreams have been written out and then life just kind of brings it into your path, but it normally comes very unglamorous, unannounced, and very easy to miss. And it usually still takes a lot of faith to walk through those doors in my experience.
Wow, that's awesome. 29. That's the dream right there. So how long have you been practicing now in that new business opportunity?
Yeah. So I guess 11 years. I'm 40 now. So wow. Yeah, do the math. 11 years as a business owner, and then grew our team and have been a professor since 2016, adjunct professor at different universities. So yeah, it's been really fun.
That's so awesome. So it takes time to get where you want to get to, but when did you start evaluating what core values, beliefs, and kind of morals played, one, personally for you, but two, into how you wanted to steward an opportunity for entrepreneurship in business, whether that was when you started at 29, or did you have ideas that you kind of, cornered around and revolved your life around and then sought to have your business kind of center around as well? When did that kind of hit for you?
Yeah, I love that question. So I think part of it for me, I went to Christian grad school. And so we had spiritual formation. We had things that helped develop and ground us in our ethos, our ethics, our morals, the grounding of who I am and why I do what I do. So having that vision has been really helpful, especially in psychology and in business. There's a lot of different things that can kind of pull you off center. There's greed, there's fear of man, there's people pleasing, there's compromise, there's integrity issues on every curve. And if you don't already know that, we become sitting ducks and it's very easy to drift from our compass. So I think having a really firm foundation early on was really helpful. And I just wrote mine down: be ethical, excellent, anointed, and above reproach. So in everything I do, I try to filter it through those 4 key principles. There's probably more now, but that at the genesis of my organization, that's what I wanted as my company culture. And then now we have more drivers that I don't have all memorized because it's much longer, but those were kind of my 4 tenets to begin with.
Man, I love those. It's so important to have things you can always cling to in life. Obviously, man, our relationship with the Lord and seeking to be more like Jesus every day, but having those things named in life can always remind you to evaluate where you're at and say, hey, am I living the way I want to right now? And how do I get back to where I want to be? You know what I'm saying?
Love it.
So awesome. So we went a little bit over what drew you towards psychology, but how did you get to kind of psychologically and spiritually oriented executive coaching? I was really curious when I heard you at this luncheon, just talking about the way that you view just the human psyche spiritually and mentally and emotionally, and how you incorporate that into your coaching was just very intriguing to me. So could you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So in studying psychology, accumulative probably about 20 years, and just a lifelong learner, been learning all the things in psychology. And then over probably, I think I've been seeing patients about 15 or more years. I've been an actual psychologist since 2012, I believe. So in all of that time, learning as much as I can about all the psychological models, and then knowing I'm called to work with leaders. So I have a nonprofit called 7M Culture. So there's a philosophy called the 7 Mountains of Culture. And the way that you shape a society is you get key people to be at the top of each of those 7 mountains of influence to have the greatest reach in shaping how we make policy, what gets funded, what industry is at the lead, who is at the lead, what person is having a vote at the table. So that nonprofit, which is built on prior people, mine is to help people have healthy souls as they go up their mountain of influence. So a lot of my clients are executives, many CEOs. They could be pastors, worship leaders, influencers, media, and artisans. So up those mountains, we want people to have healthy souls. And so in the last 20 years of studying psychology, and probably about 10 years, I'd say, of studying leadership really intensely. And now I'm actually a performance leadership psychologist. So helping leaders optimally perform. Then let's take a really thorough analysis of what was intended in our created design, what goes wrong, and then how do we restore cohesion or symphony back into the inner world. We live in a society, unfortunately, that loves a quick fix. And that reductionistic way of thinking causes a lot of people to get rich saying, hey, follow my 5-step plan. Hey, do this thing and you'll have mentalize and memorize your thing and blah, blah. And those are nice sounding, but they're all these one-off tokens. It's not thorough and robust. And so that's where I've really taken the time to study and analyze what causes optimal performance. And just like a fantastic vehicle, you would need premium fuel, you would need regular checkups to make sure that engine is properly aligned, calibrated, all the things are properly working. That's how I see the inner world. So the analogy I've given is, because I work with so many CEOs, that you see your inner world like a corporation and your executive reasoning. So that spirit man, which just means your true self, some people might call it your gut, your intuition, your knower. Not all of my clients have faith by any means. A lot of my clients are just the full range of whatever, because they know the results of when they work with me. They don't feel like they have to have a spiritual faith, but that's mine. And that's how the origin of this model came about, is that you have a true self, and that's your gut. That's the intuition part of you that knows that you know something, even though you don't know why. And then you have your executive assistant, right? Like your managers or vice presidents, and that's your soul. The soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. And the soul is doing its best to operate at a human level. And so that means it's taking in all what's rational and what's not rational, what's realistic. How do I feel? What impulses do I have? What habits and behaviors and belief systems do I have as a human being? And so you might consider your spirit man knows truth, capital letters. And then your soul knows what's true in your environment, in your life history. So people could say, you know, I know that I'm worthy, but I don't feel worthy. I know that I'm good at such and such, but I really have failed in this area so much. It's hard to get back up and believe. Part of me knows I'm called to write the book, start the business, get in the dating relationship, you know, go the next level with my sport or athletic. I know that somewhere inside, spirit man. And then, but something inside is confirming to me that's unrealistic. That's not possible. And what we want is for our soul, which is telling you the reality of your circumstance, your life experience, not to hijack your spirit man, which has vision for your future. That you actually have DNA, you have your genetic makeup is actually wired toward what you're called and destined to do in this life. That there's actually a plan, and your genome, which means your genetic fingerprint, is pre-wired with all of that ready. But then we grow up in a broken world with bad things, life experience, you know, heartache, disappointment. And so our soul is storing all of that and then creates automaticity. Much like a cell phone or a computer, it auto-populates based on our life experience, and it steps in to protect us. So where we felt inadequate, at 2, at 10, at 20, wherever we felt less than, inferior. Now I have a part of me dedicated toward making sure the imposter syndrome, that I am always the best in the room, that I never fail, that I'm always perfect. The problem is that's an executive assistant stepping in front of the true self. Because at some point, a part of my committee on the inside, we have different parts of self, not in like a multiple personality way, more in a multifaceted prism way.
Sure.
That some part of the soul is going, oh, I need to fake it till I make it. I need to step in front. I need to do it until it feels real. The problem with that, while that's helpful at a software level, conscious awareness, it doesn't actually change the hard drive. So going back all to these get rich schemes that people tell you, do this class, do this course, do this funnel, and we're going to fix that for you. If people don't know how to upgrade your hard drive or the unconscious mind, then you're always competing against, and you're actually more likely to self-sabotage because you're turning against the parts of you that have core beliefs of pain, disappointment, shame, fear, anxiety. And by ignoring that and powering through and pulling myself up by my bootstraps, while there's a time and a place for that, if that's a lifestyle, you are a house divided against itself, and no corporation or person can function very long in that state. So that's where you see a lot of people implode. They're very successful. They run really hard. They're a driver. But then later it's like the alcoholism or the pain pills or the porn or the affairs. And they're like, where did this come from? And they're shocked at the reality that your soul can't stay in pain for a really long time. The soul is not meant to lead. The soul is meant to give you intel, like, hey, this situation is ridiculous and impossible. Do I choose to still believe and trust and run ahead in faith? Or do I now, in my own strength, try to power up and believe that? And then you have a body. And the body is responding to the signals of both the soul and the spirit. So your physiology, that's why a lot of people have internal ambivalence, because I do what I don't want to do and I don't do what I want to do. My soul and my spirit are always in conflict with each other if there is a core lie. Not always, but if there's an internal conflict and there's a lie that's believed, then my inner world is sending different signals. Because the organ of the brain, the misnomer is, oh, my brain is broken. My brain has ADHD. Your brain doesn't have ADHD and your brain is not broken. So let me say that again, because we live in a society that is very grounded to our physiology, blaming your body for your mental health or your self-sabotage or your ambivalence or imposter syndrome. It's just the inverse. Complete opposite. Your spirit and your soul are sending signals, because if we take the body and we just put the organ of the brain on a table, which I've worked with cadavers, if you put that out there, the brain doesn't have a response. There's nothing signaling and sending a signal, electric and chemical impulses to tell the brain to respond. So if you think of an internal symphony, if all parts of the symphony are going in the same direction, the brain is cohesive, it's clear, and it's organized. You can focus, you can retain information, you recall information, you're able to do the task that you're wanting to do. But if your inner world is chatty and chaotic and there's fears and anxieties and things we're not dealing with inside, then now your brain looks very chaotic and cluttered and ADHD. And we know from research, anxiety, depression, and PTSD all have the exact same symptoms as ADHD. Because the physiology of the brain is just responding to all these signals that the soul and the spirit are sending it. And so we live in a culture, again, that just wants the quick fix. We want to just put a pill. And I'm not against pills. I'm not for or against medication, but I'm saying we're far more nuanced and we need a way more deliberate and robust understanding of the inner world to be able to help people steward. Oh, that's why I keep glitching on this area. That's why I feel fear, anxiety, worry. That's why I can't focus, because I have that big presentation and there's an unconscious part of me that has shame and the fear of inadequacy being exposed. I work with CEOs and founders all the time that are brilliant. And yet some part on the inside still feels like, oh crap, if anybody sees through this, they're going to know that I don't know what I'm doing and I don't deserve a seat at this table. Sure. And so that sends cortisol, the stress hormone. It disrupts brain function. It over alerts the amygdala, back of the brain. And so that fire alarm is going off, which takes away energy from smart brain or the prefrontal cortex. So that's where I help executives and leaders and influencers recognize where's that internal glitch, because you're not broken. My fundamental belief is God did not make people broken. We just need a more sophisticated understanding of where there's a misalignment. How do we restore that alignment? So now we have healthy, good people that are disruptive leaders in the sphere of influence where they're called to take that mountain.
Wow. So much to take in. That is incredible. People hear it again. You are not broken. You're not made broken. This world and sin is what makes us broken. And so, man, that is why we need a savior. So did you And did you study all this and realize this for yourself, or was this a personal journey for you that you then incorporated into how you wanted to practice?
Super combination. So I am psychodynamic and theoretical orientation, which just means a lot more sophisticated understanding that we have an unconscious mind, we have parts of self, and Kohut is the first person to talk about this cohesion thing. And so he stopped with, hey, we don't have cohesion inside. And so the therapist helps serve that role and function, which is ego regulation. It just means kind of like keeping the self together. And so building on the work of brilliant minds that have gone before and studying a lot of the more obscure voices, unfortunately, because with pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies driving a lot of the decisions mental health makes because of cost and ease, that there's a lot of brilliant work out there, hugely paramountly needed to be studied. And I'll talk to students all the time who've graduated and they're now in the field and they're like, oh, I've never heard of psychoanalysis. I've never heard of psychodynamic theory. And I'm like, I can't believe, like, this is so brilliant and rich, but it's not what's pushed because there's not as much backing and money. So it's then harder to get the research studies done. Sure. So that's an aside. I did not come with all of it originally. It's psychodynamic and theory and orientation. There's other voices like internal family systems, which also really has a root in psychodynamic as well. And so there's works that are complementary. And then I used a lot of what's called inner healing or freedom techniques that are coming out of more of those alternative medicine type spaces, not new age, more faith and spirituality. And then trying to create a synthesis. So people aren't having to go to like, oh, I go to the counseling, I go to the pastoral counseling, I go to inner healing, I go to, my coach, I go like, how do we create something so robust and seamless so that you can go to one person and work on all the different parts of self, restore cohesion or symphony back to your internal world. So then we can optimize your performance and your leadership. So that's been the journey of trying to create synthesis and then new insight along the way that the Lord has been teaching me. And then in the years of practice of working with people and with myself, because I'm going to do it on me before I do it on anyone else. Then we create something that's really helpful and able to be packaged and delivered for others to access.
Wow. Incredible. I think you hinted at it, but can you tell me more about the internal board meeting? Just kind of the cohesion of all these selves and the soul and the spirit and the body, and what's the optimal, balance between those and who leads what, and just I'd love for you to elaborate on that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That is an original concept, which really just because I'm a CEO and I work with lots of executives, that internal board meeting became a really helpful allegory for me. That the parallel being that your physical body has 78 organs, unless you've had surgery and one of those got removed. You have over 100 billion neurons, and you have 11 different systems, always that will stay separate. Your cardiovascular will never become the same as your skeletal. Your endocrine system, which is hormones, that'll never become the same as, all the other epidermis and all these things, right? Like all the systems stay separate and yet have a role and a unique function, but they have to be interdependent and rely on one another for the whole one body to function. I grew up with autoimmune conditions. And so my body, one of those systems was turning against another one. And so I was a house divided physiologically, and then realizing, oh, I had repressed trauma memories. So that just means my inner world decided that's too threatening and scary. I'm going to hide that so that I can continue to grow up and mature and develop in life. And then I'm going to store that somewhere else until I'm ready to bring that conscious and steward that insight. So what that looked like is my body was physically doing what my soul was doing, that I had turned against. I had denied parts of myself, just like my body was denying and turning against, villainizing parts of my organs. And so that helped me that helped me make a connection of how the soul and the spirit in the metaphysical realm probably are the same principle. Because there's a law in creation that whatever the first mention, usually creation follows that principle. So if we can see it in the body and we can see that there's a Father, a Son, and a Holy Spirit comprising one God, that it makes sense that the three will never become one, and yet there's cohesion. And I would see how Jesus would brag on the Holy Spirit. and they'd brag on the Father, and then the Father would brag on Jesus. Like, you see this cohesion and the celebration of different parts in relationship. So cohesive that it's like a symphony that's in perfect harmony. But the problem is when we have any part of us that we deny, and in psychoanalysis, they would call it disavow. So I'm disavowing a part of myself and saying, no, I don't like that weakness. I don't like my temper. I don't like that shame. I don't like that feeling of inadequacy or out of control. I don't like anxiety. I want to be strong and tough, whatever it might be. And so when we do, now I've turned against ourselves, and we have other parts of the soul that then step in front of your true nature. I believe the biggest fight in this generation is denying who you actually are for a surrogate identity of saying, no, this is who I am. I'm going to define myself. I'm going to define who I am and what I'm going to do. And so what they're doing is taking a wounded part of the soul that's been suppressed, and now all of a sudden empowering that to be the full expression of the self. Kind of like an adult man saying, I'm a 6-year-old little girl. There's this wounded psychological self state that hasn't matured, hasn't healed. And then now I sum up the whole of who I am as if that's who I am. Instead of going, part of me is athletic, and part of me is really driven. Part of me is really learners. Part of me is really nurturing. And in health, the right part of the personality structure comes to the right situation. In lack of health, like PTSD, the anxiety stays queued up, or the anger stays queued up, and people have road rage, or their sexuality just perpetually is on, and they're not able to discriminate like appropriate relationship, not appropriate relationship to express my sexuality, not with the intern at work, that those things get cluttered because the parts of self aren't able to be expressed in the right situation. So then that's called compensation. A part of the soul now has to step in and over-regulate because I've disavowed the parts of me that are supposed to be leading. In health, I believe it is our true self, our spirit man, that is supposed to be the disruptive leader, the powerhouse badass that's leading.
Sure.
But when the soul steps in front, it overcompensates, and that's where we have imposter syndrome. That's where we walk with a chip on our shoulder, that we always feel like people don't like us, don't reject us, because in reality, we don't like and we don't reject, and we are not accepting parts of ourselves. So as we're unpacking an internal board meeting, we recognize we have all these committee members or employees of the corporation. And some parts of us, our spirit man parts, are supposed to lead. And when we're in that space of leading from the true self, you'll find that you just naturally have peace and joy. You have self-control. You have like a sense of goodness and focus and clarity. It's like all firing synergy things are going in the same direction. But when you and I have little parts of our soul that go into regression, now it's like there's a hijacking, a corporate coup, if you will. And a part of the soul is now leading instead of your true self. And so what that means is it's like a manager rather than an executive. And what we know about managers is they're always trying to maintain the status quo, while the executive has the vision of where we're going, the impossible. That's why you're a disruptive leader. That's why you're powerful and anointed, and you take mountains and you run on heels with leaping jumps because you see the future. That's what an executive does. A manager says, okay, what's the cost? What's the threat? What's the danger? How do I manage? It's such a poverty mindset. It's such a here and now and just trying to like reactively respond to the world. When we're in that state, you'll find that you do a lot more of imposter syndrome. You'll find yourself doing a lot more of behavior modification, of trying to manage yourself rather than streamlined and focused toward your goal. You may self-sabotage in your thoughts and your behaviors and your emotions. And you're like, why do I go like a yo-yo, like so far, and then I'm tethered back? Because there's a manager part of your soul in a seat of an executive, and that's an internal board meeting, is we find out what's the lie, what's the internal disruption that caused a soul part of me to be in the seat of leadership instead of in the seat of manager. And then we have a body, and the body is responding to all these signals from our spirit man or our executive chairs, our manager or our soul, and then the body is like your customer facing employees. And so the body is just responding. I've worked on cadavers before. We cut open the brain. The brain actually does not have any stimulation in of itself. It is always responding to the catalyst of what the soul and the spirit, the intangible, the metaphysical realm, creates the electrochemical signals that tell the brain to do something. So most of my clients are taught to think, oh, my ADHD brain. Oh, my anxiety. Oh, my worry. Oh, my family has this. And are there elements of that may be true? Sure. But we've become very unsophisticated in the way that we've approached ourselves. So if we can learn to pause and say, this symptom is actually really helpful intel. If I pop the hood of the engine and I start figuring out, why do I have a manager in the seat of an executive? I don't have the right person at the right seat at the table. And now I'm living with a fear-based or management instead of a fearless and empowered visionary part of me leading. When we can do that inner work, now we put synergy or harmony back to the inner world. And now the body responds because it's not getting competing signals. It's getting one cohesive signal, fearless, clear, organized, and vision. When we have that, many of my clients notice their cognitive abilities, including memory, focus, concentration, and recall are improved. And so that's the work of doing an internal board meeting, is really thorough analysis of how's my inner world. Let's put the right parts of me back in the right seats, resolve whatever needed to be done that caused them to get out of alignment to begin with. And now we can lean forward into that unconquerable space as visionaries.
I love that title of internal board meeting. It just makes sense of how it all is like a symbiotic relationship there. And just that analogy of looking under the hood and not rushing through life and ignoring, warning signals that are going off that can come out in just personal health that's like super basic, or maybe something really complex that you have to dive into mentally or emotionally and spiritually. And I mean, even in college, I can see how that plays out in the ebb and flow of seasons, and how, man, life is meant to be lived in a rhythmic way that's a disciplined and has the opportunity to stop and evaluate where you're at. And that's so cool that you incorporate that into not just your life, but the way you do business too. So
thank you.
Incredible. Kind of along those lines, wrapping up here, how does your faith that you talked about, that you live personally, how do you weave that into the way you do business? And how do you see through that lens and see people that maybe don't even have a faith? But how do you relate to them well in a way that isn't putting forth your faith in a way that's like unattractive to people, but still incorporating it into how you do business, if that makes sense?
Yes, I love that question. At Crawford Clinics, we don't necessarily advertise as a faith-oriented practice. So many of our clients come from all kinds of backgrounds, and many of my clients, they may not be ascribing to any faith or something different than mine. So it's less about the actual words that are used and more about the spirit of excellence. So in the way that I see the humanity of my client, the way that I honor them and respect them, the way that I provide excellent therapy or excellent executive coaching, as a leadership performance psychologist, my job is to unlock the treasure in my client. By doing that, I believe that's me recognizing the brilliant created design of my client. And the cool thing is, research finds that people who do secular therapy, they never talk about religion or anything like that, are more likely to believe that because a therapist has seen all the bad things, all the stuff that I'm like, oh, I hate that about me, I don't want anyone to know, but you've seen that and you've loved me. You've recognized the humanity and the value in me. They're more likely to believe that friends, loved ones, romantic partners, and even God is more likely to be able to love and accept them with their brokenness and flaws, rather than this unconscious bias that if you knew everything about me, you would reject me. So they've found that people are more likely to be open to faith and spirituality after good therapy without ever saying words. It's the way that we show up and we love and value the humanity of the person in front of us. And we do excellent work in their goal. So now they feel like themselves and they can show up and let other people see the gifts and the treasure in them. Then we can see people show up in brighter and more vibrant ways, which is me loving my clients with intentionality.
Oh, wow. Incredible. I love the way that you seek to relate to people and let your faith come out in that way, in a way that's like, not overbearing, but just true and authentic. And that's the kind of faith that makes a difference, not, just words.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. And so evident in the way that even just getting to talk to you, as I'm sure the audience can tell, has just been a delight and a joy to talk to you. And that's just evident in the way that you communicate and the way that you lead and the way you serve people. So kind of wrapping us up here, we'll do a speed round. So quick 1-sentence replies to a handful of answers. So we'll start with, what is a hobby you pursue that benefits you?
I'm writing Chloe's Chronicles. So it's my psychology book written allegorically as espionage and spy. So my challenge is to do the things that she does in the book. And so I've jumped out of planes, I've flown planes, I've gone deep sea diving and done the things, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I interviewed a CIA agent on my podcast the other day. So just trying to do all the things that she does has really enriched my life and challenged me to try things I never would.
Wow, that sounds fun. Another one, what is one of your pet peeves?
Inauthenticity. I'd rather just be honest. Let's just be where we're at.
For sure. I can definitely tell that by talking to you. It's incredible. What hill would you die on?
Protecting the innocence of children.
Wow. That is something that this world needs very, very badly. What is one of your favorite leadership quotes? And it could be one of your own.
I love the military and CIA things. I would literally be the worst of ever to try to do it myself, but I love them. So I love the SEAL one about fast is slow and slow is fast. Oh no, I don't think I said it right.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. There we go. We got it. And then it sounds like you've done a lot of adventures, but if you had to do another one and money was no consequence, where would you go and what would you do?
I have traveled a lot. The one that comes up the quickest would be to go to Bali. What are those little tiki hut things that are over the water? It's not, helping anyone else, but I think it'd be really cool to be in a hot tub with a clear bottom and swimming fish underneath. I think that would be really neat.
Hey, sometimes the best way to help others is to help yourself first, right?
There you go.
There we go. Well, Dr. Shannan Crawford of Crawford Clinics, it's been a pleasure and a delight getting to talk to you today. And thank you for your time and allowing me to come on your own podcast. But I hope that you all enjoyed getting to know Dr. Shannan Crawford better today. And I was blessed by the conversation. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. Colson Youngblood, tell us about you and how do people connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Colson Youngblood on Instagram if that matters to you, but I go to A&M right now, so if you see me in College Station, say hi. I am actually a woodworker right now, so if you need anything made for yourself, check out youngbloodwoodworking.com. But I'm just a man seeking to be more like Jesus every day, so run into me. I'd love to talk to you.
I love it. You're so fun. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And bye, everybody. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for investing in yourself, your family, and your team. We are honored to serve you and your vision.